Hello and welcome to the On the Couch podcast, the podcast that gives you the view from the therapist chair. I'm your host, John Dennis, a licensed professional counselor. You're listening to OTC episode 71 with Melissa Sauder of Emotional Wellness for Women. Hello again, OTC listeners. Welcome back for episode 71. Coming at you. I got to talk with Melissa Sauder for this one, and she has her own practice, Emotional Wellness for Women. You can check her out at melissasauderlpc.com. So that's melissasauderlpc.com. And mainly I wanted to focus with her on the topic of infertility and just the struggles that a person or a couple can go through when dealing with this. You know, it impacts so many people. And similar to the conversation I had in episode 70 with Dan and Kristen Naylor, it's not something everybody talks about. It's, it's not on their radar until it starts to impact them. And for a lot of people and a lot of couples, it creates so much stress and tension and can really impact their mental health. So I wanted to talk with her about some of the ins and outs of that, and just to share a little bit of the statistics on this. According to the CDC, about 6% of married women aged 15 to 44 years in the US are unable to get pregnant after 1 year of trying, and that's termed infertility. And about 12% of women aged 15 to 44 years in the US have difficulty getting pregnant or carrying a pregnancy to term, which is referred to as impaired fecundity. And this isn't something that just impacts women. You know, many couples struggle with infertility and seek help to become pregnant, but it's often thought of as, this is only something that women struggle with. On the contrary, in about 35% of couples with infertility, a male factor is identified along with a female factor. So in about 8% of couples with infertility, a male factor is the only identifiable cause. And almost 9% of men aged 25 to 44 years in the US reported that they or their partner saw a doctor for advice, testing, treatment for infertility at some point in their lifetime. And again, I think it carries a lot of stigmatism to it. I think a lot of people are so afraid to even go talk to somebody, go get testing done because of the answers that they might get. And they often avoid that, but that it continues to put pressure on themselves as the individual or the couple relationship. And it can just be this like perfect storm where it just really creates a lot of emotional and relational struggles. So, like I said, I wanted to focus on this because it's something that a lot of the couples and individuals that I've worked with over the years have, just had such a difficult journey through infertility, and just the different options and what are they comfortable trying, what are they not comfortable trying, let alone, all of the, everybody's like an armchair expert that, has an opinion and, oh, well, you should do this or you should try that, or why aren't you trying this, or, oh, well, it's okay, you can still adopt, or, and people just say all of these things, and it's almost this like death by a thousand cuts. The individual or the couple just keeps taking these hits over time as, on social media, people are announcing, gender reveal parties or births or things like that. And not that people shouldn't celebrate the things that are happening in their lives. But at the same time, those other people that are dealing with infertility, it kind of digs at them every time. And, if that's every holiday where grandma says something about, well, when are you going to give me grandkids or, great grandkids or, whatever. And it just really starts to weigh on a person. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with Melissa around this topic. If you or someone is dealing with this, again, just like I said last episode, educate yourself, talk with them about it, and about what are you comfortable with, or what helps, what doesn't help in talking with you, and terms that I might use, or questions I might ask, or things like that. Just being willing to hear that person or that couple out, and being a source of support for them can mean so much difference. So I hope you enjoy it. Before we jump to the episode, I did want to announce the 5 winners for the copy of Thursday is the New Friday, Joe Sanok's book that launched October 5th. So you can pick it up on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you purchase books or audio books. So the 5 winners that we had will be getting a copy sent to them are Chris Stanton, from Holbrook, Arizona, Veronica March from Springfield, Ohio, Michael Neesmith from Vermilion, South Dakota, Martha Burke from Germantown, Tennessee, and Patty Neto from Portugal. So congratulations to all the winners. Thank you for checking out the podcast. And I cannot wait for you all to speed through this book and start to put it into practice. It will change your lives. So enjoy episode 71 with Melissa Sauder. Well, I have here on the Couch podcast, Melissa Sauder, who is a licensed therapist, and she's going to be talking with us today about maternal mental health, specific to the issue of infertility. So, Melissa, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, John. I really appreciate this time that I can talk about something that I feel is really important for women.
Definitely, it's so prevalent. It's something I see so much just in the couples counseling that I do. I've been looking forward to trying to nail this down, and you're popular. So you have your own practice now. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, I specialize working with women. So I'm really excited to get that up and running.
Awesome. And so that is just the Melissa Sauder LPC.
Yes. So Melissa Sauder, LPC. And, I work with women and all different types of concerns, whether that's depression and anxiety or maternal mental health. So that would include postpartum depression and anxiety, miscarriage support, and then along with the fertility treatment support.
Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. And how did you find yourself in that niche? What drew you to that?
Yeah, so I had worked in a group private practice, and we really found that Lancaster County is lacking with women's needs in mental health. And so we really started digging into that a little bit more and found that maternal mental health specifically, there's not a lot of providers that can help in that area. And so we were, really proactive with trying to get additional training and really make that niche known around here so we can help women who truly need it.
And even just that, I find so surprising, not to be stereotypical, but I mean,
Sure.
You think of just the history of therapy.
Yep.
I mean, a majority of my clients, a lot of times is moms, wives, a lot of female clients, I would say kind of tipping the scale. So it's sort of surprising that,
Sure.
The focus on maternal mental health and women's mental health has been lacking in a lot of areas. That's kind of crazy.
I know. Yeah. It's disappointing.
Yeah. So specific to, fertility treatment support and infertility, what does that entail? What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah. And, I really think it's important to start off with what fertility and infertility is.
Yes. Operational definitions. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Because we typically think more about primary infertility, which primary infertility is whenever women have problems conceiving and or carrying to term with having unprotected sex for over a year.
Okay.
And then secondary infertility, which is not as well known, is whenever a woman has already had a child or more than one, and then now they are having difficulty conceiving or carrying to term. And secondary infertility is actually more common and more frequent.
Okay.
But we don't hear too much about that because they are not as quick to receive fertility treatment and or mental health treatment if they have any distress. So we do tend to see more of the primary infertility patients.
Okay. And that, we'll get back into that later because I have a listener question that came in about primary and secondary.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. And so as that, it makes sense then that the women who are experiencing infertility, whether it's primary or secondary, it can be so very overwhelming. They have this idea and hope and goals to have a family or, have more children. And then they hit this roadblock.
Yeah. I say so often, there's so much pressure around, there's so much of our culture in America focuses on parenting and having kids and raising a family. They talk of, I don't know what the American dream constitutes anymore, but it used to be the, 2.5 kids and the white picket fence. Yep. They used to always say. But yeah, just the endless amounts of pressure around that.
Sure. Yeah. And, we're really taught too that it's supposed to be easy to have this family. And, even in high school classes, they teach you how not to get pregnant. And young adults, really, a lot of people are striving not to have any children. And then to find out that it could actually be extremely difficult. It's so overwhelming and distressing.
And that, you led me right into what are common myths that people deal with, and that being an obvious one of like, oh, it's so easy to conceive. And,
Yeah. And it's really not. What they, along with some of those myths, is that it's a female problem too. And we're really finding out that it's not, only 1/3, they kind of break it up in thirds, and 1/3 it's due to women's reproductive and 1/3 is due to men. And then the last kind of 1/3 there is just unknown. They can't figure out, why, these people are unable to conceive.
Wow. And that's, I imagine, sort of apples and oranges of, I think in the couples that I work with, nobody wants it to be them. Nobody wants it to be, well, it's my fault. I feel like I have failed. But then we really don't like it when we don't know, when it's a question mark. And especially we're hurtling towards 2020, the idea of like, how do you not know? How does science and medicine not know at this point?
Oh, yeah. And that can add another layer of that distress. Definitely. There's all different types of thought processes that come into play, and they're all pretty harsh. Right. And so with that unknown, then there's, it has to be me.
Yep. Yeah. We're not really gentle with ourselves. It's pretty hard.
Yeah.
So are there other myths that are out there that you run into?
Yeah. So one of the myths too, I think, is that we feel like this is back to the easiness of becoming pregnant, right? Is that it's not common to hit a roadblock with fertility. And actually it is. We're finding that 1 in 8 individuals are having problems conceiving.
Wow.
And that's a low number.
Yeah. And in terms of your work, do you just work with an individual, or are you working with couples as well, where you're meeting with the spouse and kind of helping them to understand what's going on? Or
Yeah, so it's case by case. I usually work individually, but there is always times where I will have the spouse come in and we can just overall talk about what this looks like and try to figure out ways of coping together so that they can feel connected.
Hmm.
Um, so it's really just dependent on what the woman would like to have happen in our treatment.
Okay. And are there any trends that you see there in terms of? I guess I don't know if you are able to speak in terms of heterosexual versus homosexual couples, or in terms of the other partner. Are there trends that you see there, or myths, issues?
Mhm. Sure. Yeah. So as far as myths, if it comes to so trends in this, well, let me go backwards.
Yeah.
So trends,
Lot to unpack.
medically,
Lot to
I
unpack.
know, kind of. How do I get it all in? Yeah, so trends, medically, we have a lot of different options now for heterosexual couples and homosexual couples.
Okay.
Um, with IVF, and that fact too, if the woman is having trouble conceiving, they can then go through IVF treatments and hopefully that can be successful.
Hmm.
But for any couple, they have egg donors and sperm
Hmm.
donors now too.
Yeah.
And that allows for someone who is unable to have children, or a same sex couple, they can go through those donors so that they can then have a family of their own.
Mm.
Uh, but then here comes a myth that, if they're using donors and they're not biologically their children, will I become attached? And, will I
Mm.
love this as much as I would as if it, came from me biologically? And that's so very distressing for
And you're saying
yeah.
that's along the lines of almost like a postpartum anxiety of like, am I going to connect with them?
Sure. Yeah, that can definitely come into that postpartum. And sometimes people are not sure to make that decision just based on those thoughts, too.
Okay. Sure.
Mhm.
Well, and yeah, obviously it's such a crapshoot for lack of a better term of like there's just so many different things that can happen, and I think that's
Sure.
where people's mental health really starts to go off the rails. Is just
Hmm.
yeah, there are a lot of what ifs in it, and that
Yeah.
we don't like that's a lot of runway for us to play with.
Oh,
Um,
gosh. Yeah. Hmm.
mm,
Yeah. And, I say it's a myth, too, because what we do know about adoption or using donors is that attachment is not just biological.
mm,
So that would be something that treatment would really entail, too, if we have to go down that avenue, is really the psychoeducation of attachment. And it doesn't have to be biological in order for that to thrive.
okay. Yeah, and feel free to yes, psychoeducate us on attachment because that's obviously a huge thing. Um,
Sure.
with the infertility and um, issues that you're seeing in your practice, um, what are the common things that people are struggling with in terms of the thoughts, the negative, the cognitive distortions, to use the in
Sure.
parlance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, which is definitely something I will be bringing up, the cognitive behavioral therapy piece of treatment. But I thought about this question as far as struggles and symptoms, and the list is long.
Yeah.
And and I'm going to just say women since I specialize in women, but this is not just inclusive to them. Men struggle with a lot of these symptoms too,
Mm,
or if it's same-sex couple, both spouses. But
hmm.
one piece is that we really re- look at infertility as a reproductive trauma.
Mm,
And so, what we know with trauma is that, it really impacts us and distresses us on all areas of life. And so, for women who are experiencing infertility, it hits us biologically
hmm.
because that's the heart of the issue, right? Like, we are not having reproductive success as much or as what we had thought we would have.
Hmm.
And then psychological, there's the distress that comes alongside of that, which is where the self blame comes in, the inadequacy, feeling of failure. It's like a personal hit.
Yeah.
Our body is not doing what we want it to be doing. And then, last is that social aspect. And,
Hmm.
and many women feel isolated and like they don't fit in. And
Mm,
the piece of that trauma is that these women are re-experiencing this multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is, it's just, yeah.
Well,
Or,
and
hmm
yeah, I was going to say that you were saying the hit to self of like the physical and a lot of the terminology that I hear people use is like just that feeling of like my body has betrayed me,
yes.
that I don't add up, I'm not adequate, I don't match up to my peers or
Yep.
any other generation.
hmm
um, and yeah, like you said, people they're just kind of walking through daily life taking hit
hmm
after hit from
Right.
internal and external.
Yes.
Okay.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, if we look at it more specifically, they might be walking through Target and then there's the baby section.
Yep.
And as they're walking through, they see a pregnant woman and,
Hmm.
uh, things like that. And then biologically, too, there's really a grief and loss that comes along with each menstrual cycle that may happen
Hmm.
because that's another hit to them that they're not pregnant this month.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for pointing that out, because I think
Sure.
a lot of people don't know that happens. That
Mhm.
it's like daily, but like you were saying, it can be monthly. It can be,
Sure.
um, and even families sometimes are the worst perpetrators. A lot of
Yeah.
times, the support system, to use quotey fingers on radio, it's always
Yep.
good. But you go to like Thanksgiving dinner or family get together, and what's the question everybody asks? Like, oh,
Yep.
are you pregnant yet? Or are you expecting? When am I going to get grandkids?
Yeah. And what I really try to work with women too is empowering them to figure out how to handle those types of questions.
Mm.
Because even strangers on the street, right?
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
are you? You have one child. When are you having a second? And sometimes well, not sometimes. Usually, it's pretty insensitive, but that
Yeah.
person doesn't mean to.
Hmm.
And so then, how do we empower ourselves to then say something back so it informs that other person too?
Sure. Well, and yeah, a lot of times just the grief and it's very raw, and usually, yeah, trying to help people understand like, okay, people, they're not out to get you. They are not
Right.
trying to, make you feel worse,
hmm
similar to when somebody passes away, they're
Sure.
just saying things because they're
hmm
either not very self-aware, or it's kind of, culturally conditioned to like, oh, thoughts and prayers, you know.
Right.
Um,
hmm
Man, okay. And so, um, what advice do you typically give to clients? Or is there like something you can pass on? Any treatment technique that this is one of my favorites, or something like that?
Sure. Yeah. So my treatment focus tends to be aimed towards cognitive behavioral therapy, which is where we really look at our patterns and see if there's any, what you had mentioned earlier, cognitive distortions,
Hmm.
uh, which are just those unhelpful ways of thinking. And we really pull those out and see how that might be causing more distress for us.
Hmm.
And we then try to restructure, what's another way of thinking about this? What's a more helpful way of thinking about this?
Hmm.
With cognitive behavioral therapy, I think it's also so helpful for women in this situation because they have then a toolbox of skills that they can take home with them, and really pull them out whenever maybe they have one of those triggers hit them.
Hmm.
And yeah, and one specific skill that I find a lot of women find helpful is what's called a coping card.
Hmm.
And I like to just call it a cheat sheet because
Sure.
whenever you are in so much distress, you somewhat have like, let's say you have glasses on during that time of distress and they tend to have fog, right? They're all fogged up
Hmm.
and can't quite think clearly or see clearly. And so, what a coping card can do is it can eliminate the need to try to think of anything in that time.
Hmm.
And instead, it just walks you through step by step. What do I need to do in this situation? So, it's
Okay.
a cheat sheet and it'll
Yeah.
walk through cognitive skills and it'll walk through a lot of mindfulness too to try to calm down that distress level so that the lenses become a bit more clear.
Okay. Man, I like that. You know, one, it made me think of football coaches that, you know, they have that gigantic laminated, like it's got all the plays, all the, you know,
Yeah.
percentages and everything. And that's, they're like, okay, they live and die by that.
Hmm.
And then also it's like a really specific expansion on the sobriety chip in Alcoholics Anonymous, or like it's that
Yeah.
reminder of like, okay, this is, you know, you got this, you can do this.
Yep. Yeah. Sort of like a grounding tool.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. And then, especially for a lot of people, you know, they can put it in their purse, they can put it in their car, they can, you know,
Sure.
carry it around
On
on
their
them.
phone.
And
Yep.
yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
And are there any specific tools or things you would try to teach for spouses or family members?
Hmm. Yeah. So whenever family members or spouses would come in, usually I would have the woman really try to figure out what specifically do they need from their partner.
Mm,
Uh, and so it really can be individualized to that degree. And sometimes women don't know. And so then we focus on both of them or family members understanding that, they're, whether it's grief that they're experiencing, loss, or just a lot of those mood fluctuations that come into play.
hmm
It's that, everybody processes and copes differently. And really having the idea that it doesn't mean that they're against each other.
mm,
If we're talking about a heterosexual couple, maybe the wife is at home in bed crying and the husband went to the gym. It doesn't mean that just because he's going to the gym, he's not feeling any effects of this. And just because, she's crying, it doesn't mean that she's grieving or coping in a negative way. Crying
hmm
can be
Healing.
cathartic. And
Yes.
so, yeah, exactly. And so it's really helping them understand that whatever needs to happen in this time is okay. But how can
Mhm.
we make sure that you're both understanding that?
Okay. And yeah, I find so much in the couples work that I do, just psychoeducation about grief process and,
Sure.
you know, just highlighting the importance of communication, which we talk about, I think, a lot in our society, but so many times it's like, that's great, but how do you do it?
Sure.
And specific to the Gottman counseling, they teach stress reducing conversation, and like, how do you have a conversation and not make it about you?
Sure.
And you're just listening to your partner, and
Mhm.
you don't have to fix anything. You're just
Right.
supposed to connect with the emotions and let them feel that, and help them to know that you support them in that.
Exactly.
Um, but then on the flip side is also the, okay, you know, you and I don't have to feel the exact same thing at the
Hmm.
same level about the same stuff. If that,
Right.
hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Um,
No. Got it.
um, and for family members, do you just kind of give them like, okay, you were saying about equipping women to have those, you know, sort of boundary conversations with their families. What do you help them to
Yeah.
do with that?
Hmm. Do you mean for family or for the client?
Um, I guess let's start client talking to family.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, it's for women when we're working on the boundaries that they need to set with family. We talk more about their intention, right? So
hmm
family and their intention is just to ask how things are going, and
Yeah,
uh,
connect.
it's never to really, yeah, to connect. It's never to harm them, and so usually, and so
Yes.
and then we would have that conversation if it is, but it's really empowering them to figure out how can they talk to their family to tell them how they're feeling. And then also, what boundaries do they want to set? Do they want to say, I need to lead this
Mm,
conversation in the future? And so if I bring it up, then I'm okay talking about it. Or is it that, if they want to ask maybe one time, right? But not keep bringing it up or making a joke of it. They really have to figure out what does that look like for them and
hmm
how would that feel for them.
Okay. Yeah. And anything in terms of the family members, is that just like, just keep your
Mm.
mouth shut and stop asking insensitive questions? Or
yeah, right. So for them, it would more so be respecting what
the
their
boundary.
family member, respecting the boundary. And
Shocking.
also, right. And also the psychoeducation. And sometimes that really just allows the family members to understand better, because sometimes it is just that lack of understanding. Because unless you're in it, right, sometimes you don't fully know what all comes along with it.
Yeah. And I mean, everybody, I love Dax Shepard's podcast, Armchair Expert, but just that phrase of everybody is an armchair expert. You're talking to, your grandmother and suddenly she's a fertility expert and like, oh, well, did you try this? Or I was, I was Googling last night and, so you have people sending you all these like things, and that too can be multiple hits throughout a day. Like before you even start your day, you could have, text messages and emails and.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. And so as a couple is moving through treatment, what do you typically see them go through? I mean, is it that roller coaster of like pressure and anxiety and yeah. You're listening to OTC episode 71 with Melissa Sauder of Emotional Wellness for Women. We'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor.
Would you like to talk to a counselor but can't find the time? Would you rather talk to someone from the comfort of your own home? If so, Parenting and Family Solutions is here to help. We now offer teletherapy to all clients who reside in the state of Pennsylvania. Using our secure portal, you can have a video session with your counselor using a laptop, desktop computer, or smartphone. Visit our website to learn more at www.parentfamilysolutions.com or give us a call at 717-602-5560 to see if teletherapy might be a good fit for you. Let us help you build a stronger family and a healthier you.
As a couple is moving through treatment, what do you typically see them go through? I mean, is it that roller coaster of like pressure and anxiety and yeah?
Yeah, sure. So if a couple is going through fertility treatment, there are additional stressors that come into play. Okay. So the female is on so many different types of hormonal medications, and not only medications, but shot regimens, and they're pretty intense. And so, yes, and daily, and sometimes multiple times a day.
Like a pincushion. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And numerous needles. And that really has an impact on their mood. And so, I mean, hormones are raging through them. And so in that case, they're really up against the mood fluctuations, and, they really don't feel like they're in control at that point in time. Yeah. And so just that patient identity too. I mean, they have doctor's appointments every other day sometimes. And that's another piece to this, is that sometimes their identity gets shifted. Okay.
And just for the listeners, I mean, that idea of like some of those injections might have to be given by a spouse. Some they might have to give themselves.
Right.
There's issues like obviously finances play a part in it. Insurance plays a part in it. Just the whole tangled web of, the medical, billing and doctors and nurses and bedside manner and all of these different things. Did I miss anything?
Well, so something that I think, the one thing is also sex with their partner. Like intimacy is totally out the window, and privacy, because now it has to be scheduled. And sometimes they have to report back to their doctors that, we had sex last night. And, how romantic is that? And, and so in that case too, there's another layer that comes into play, not just individually, but, for the couple as well.
Well, and yeah, I mean, it definitely puts a lot of pressure and strain on a person and on a couple, depending on their situation of just communication and emotions, like you were saying. I mean, they just really fluctuate all over the place. And do you, I mean, just sort of hammer or like double and triple down on like you have to communicate with each other?
Yeah, that really comes into play so often. And, how can you two be connected and be a part of this journey together? Because something else that happens is that women do tend to take on a lot of the, and it could be internalized too, not necessarily what actually happens, but they really feel like they are the sole person who has to make all of the decisions. They usually are the person who is the pincushion, right?
Yep.
They are the ones going to the appointments usually more often. And so in that case, they do take on more of that responsibility, and then that adds more pressure for them. So it really is important for both partners to be part of the process as much as they can.
Sure. And with the, just the roller coaster ride of, like you were saying, I mean, that can be a grieving process every menstrual cycle. That can be a grieving process every doctor's appointment. How do you try to help a person or a couple navigate that?
Yeah. So that comes back to the treatment strategies, right? So we make sure that their coping strategies are solid for them as much as they can be. We're not trying to go from, let's say, if we have a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the worst emotion, we're not trying to focus on getting to a 2 out of 10. That's probably not realistic in this situation.
Yeah.
But anything that we can do in order for them to feel like, okay, I went from a 10 to an 8, that's progress, because this is so overwhelming. And so, we would make sure that for those appointments, do you have your coping card with you? How can we maybe calm down that distress even a level until you receive information? It's a lot of mindfulness too. Till you're at that appointment, how can we try to turn down the volume of anxiety? That's where the anxiety comes in, is what's going to happen at the next ultrasound. In 2 days, am I going to get my period? And then the volume turns up with that anxiety. So we work on figuring out how do we turn that down and control that.
Okay. And this just my lack of knowledge in terms of ongoing medication and psychopharmacology in the midst of fertility treatments. Do you have to discontinue, or are you able to stay on it?
Yeah. So some women are prescribed Zoloft during conception and during pregnancy. And Zoloft also is one of the safer medications too to take for breastfeeding too. So that could be a medication that really allows women to have some relief from their symptoms for basically all parts of this process for them.
Okay. And we'll throw in just the legal disclaimer of Melissa is not a medical doctor, so check with your own.
Yeah, please do that.
Excuse me. I try to frame it a lot of times, just the battle of infertility of if it's a couple, you really want to try to be as united a front as you can. Like you don't want to turn on each other and start sniping at each other, because it's just going to compound things and make it so much worse.
Exactly.
So if you can kind of focus on like, we're on the same team and we're fighting this battle against this other thing, that sometimes makes it a little bit easier. It doesn't solve the whole thing, but.
Right. But it does make it easier. And plus, we talked about the social distress that comes into play with that isolation, and that can really help support that when we gain that connection to our spouses and family.
Mm-hmm. And what's your take on social media? Are you just like, just get rid of it, just delete it?
Yeah, right. So sometimes I think that.
Yeah.
So it can, right, it's a double-edged sword.
Yep.
So I really try to work with women too to figure out, how are you feeling when you are, like, if it's more so like a support group that's online. If it's not moderated and it's just more so negative talk, then I really help the woman figure out, is this something that's helping me or not helping me? Is it causing any distress? And if it is, you don't need it right now. We'll find something that can be beneficial for you. And so in that case, we really just decipher that. But, if somebody's going down a wormhole and they're Googling things for hours upon hours about how to become pregnant, then we again focus on that anxiety and focus on psychoeducation. Conception is not a skill. You don't just eat an apple a day and you have a baby.
Yep.
And so that can really be a tough pill to swallow, so to speak, because it still just kind of hits us at our core if we're having trouble conceiving.
Sure. I will often tell people, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but I usually tell people, don't watch the movie Idiocracy.
I never saw it.
Okay, so there's a scene in it at the beginning where it basically highlights the idea that, the people that want to have children oftentimes are infertile and not able to conceive. And then the people that are not always the greatest and the greatest parents and things like that, they seem to be able to breed like rabbits. And so it kind of highlights that slice of culture.
Yeah.
Thinking back just now, I may take that part out of the interview just because it'll probably it might traumatize more of your clients.
People are going to watch it.
Yeah.
But now I want to watch it.
Yeah.
But
well, basically in the movie we've like bred ourselves stupid. It's like the idea of like photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it does. That scares me. But something else with that same question, though, as far as, because I kind of went down the negative wormhole aspect. So on the flip side, of social media and or the internet, I have found a lot of women who mentioned to me that it can be comforting to hear that other women know what they're going through, and that they are not the only one. So you really have to take it with how it makes you feel. Yeah.
I was thinking sort of the baby with the bathwater kind of idea of like, it can be a tool.
Sure.
In that, a lot of people, once you get hit by an issue, then you become passionate about it, and you become more aware and more sensitive to, whatever it is, if that's, food allergies or stillbirths or whatever. Yeah. And then you find community sometimes online and resources and things like that. But you have to learn how to, cut out the negative and find the positive. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, because there are so many positive things that they can find. It's just, how do you weed out the negative? Yeah.
Well, and again, to your point of like taking multiple hits throughout the day. I mean, you could, you're sitting down to watch TV at night, relax after work or a hard day or whatever. And all of a sudden, the episode of your favorite show has elements of what you're dealing with. And then it, it ruins your evening, and you're like, oh, crap.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So please tell me some positives. What?
Yeah.
Give me some success stories. Give us some hope. Yeah.
Yes. So, women who decide to seek out therapy and or fertility treatment, their process really works towards figuring out how to make family possible for them, because it is possible. If you want to have a family, that can happen for you. It's just, how do you get there? And that's where the process comes into play, because it's managing and gaining control over emotions. It's staying connected to family and friends. And then it's also working through grief and loss, because this family that can happen might not look like the family that was planned.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that work has been done, then it can, really start shifting towards, okay, how do I make this work for me and my family? And so it's almost like rewriting that story, figuring out that this is, things that I read all the time is that this is just a chapter in my book, right? But it does tend to define women when it's happening. So it's pulling themselves out of that and trying to work towards this next chapter and rewriting it to how they would feel comfortable.
Okay. And yeah, the having to shift expectations and, that definition of identity and things like that.
Yep.
Kind of like you were saying, it may not look exactly like you want it to. And then, okay, what does that mean? How do you face that?
Sure. Yeah. And I'm saying that, sounds easy, right? But it's terribly hard. And so that's really where the support comes into play, not only for, the therapist being supportive, but family and friends. And because that process can take a little while.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the grieving process, is there a particular model you teach or use when helping them walk through all of these different griefs?
Mm-hmm. So, I base a lot of my grief work off of David Kessler.
Okay.
And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. In that way of really looking at, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross brought in the 5 stages of grief.
Yes.
And David Kessler kind of, shaped that a little. Yeah, expanded. Thank you. Expanded that a bit. And so, we really do kind of dive into that, even if it's not a miscarriage, which can happen. If it's more so just the loss overall of what their expectations were. And so we'll really process that in that way.
So you were saying, sort of started with 5 stages, Kubler-Ross, and then Kessler kind of expanded upon it. And how do you, it sounds so simple to say, like, how do you grieve it?
I know.
Like, how do you define it? How do you communicate what you're feeling and what you're thinking? And that kind of encapsulated.
Totally it. Yeah. I haven't answered a question like that. I just worked through it with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's one of those things where it's similar to like trust. Of like, we throw those words around so much, but how do you actually do that? How, we talk about the grief process, and I would say that it is a process, but there's definitely a start. There's not always a finish.
Right.
And it's not like a class where you get a final grade and there's an exam and nope, you passed and you're done. Here's your diploma. Like it just, and then you're a lot of times left with the question of like, well, did I fully grieve it? I don't know. How do you know?
Sure. Yeah. Am I just pushing it away? Right.
Yeah. Am I in denial really still?
Right. Yeah. And it's really, one way of looking at that grief processing too is, we have this, what we call a reproductive story, and it starts in childhood, and it's not always in the forefront of our mind. And so it's really pulling out, what did that look like for me? And what was I hoping? And then processing that further and understanding, and here's that grief work, right? That this is a loss now. This is not something that might happen for me. And then it's, how do I then accept that as much as I can, knowing that it's not going to just be over, right? And then move forward with what this next chapter looks like.
And you were starting to touch on miscarriages and things like that. Some of the listener questions that came in, I had one that she had asked, are there any unique challenges that mothers who already have existing children and are struggling with infertility, when looking to grow their families, any challenges specific to that they face. So going back to what you were talking about with primary versus secondary.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of women in those situations struggle with the decision, do I seek out fertility treatment? I already have a child, if it's one, let's say, I already have this child, and they feel like here's my quotes, right? But I should be happy.
Yes, you're shooting all over yourself.
You got it. Yep. and should I push it? And so in that case, they have a lot of distress regarding what do I do? And should I even be here again, right? Should I even be sad that this isn't happening for me? And that just causes immense guilt and distress for them when they're hitting that secondary infertility.
Yeah. We have like emotions about emotions about emotions.
I know.
Like sometimes I wish we could turn it off.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And that's something that I help women figure out too. Like, what's the primary emotion? That's what we need to be working on, because secondary is always going to be there. And it usually ends up being guilt for a lot of the women that I'm working with. And so, what do we need to hash out? Which is primary, which is secondary, which is priority? And we need to stop focusing on having this wormhole of other emotions.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yes. And with just another question that had come in was, so often, the doctors will talk about, you need to limit stress.
Yeah.
Which sounds great.
Yeah, right? Sure.
Do you kind of go back to the coping cheat card to help with that? How? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad.
Tell us, Melissa, how do you get rid of all stress?
Yes, I will. If I, was a magical unicorn, I could tell you that.
There you go.
So that comes back to myths actually too. So that is quite a myth to some degree. And so, the idea is that stress causes infertility. But we now have research that shows no strong link. And so, we do still need to reduce that. It's still not healthy for us. But we do know that it doesn't impact conception to the degree that I think we have in our heads. And if that were true, urban myth. Yeah, because if that were true, then no person, in like
urban
a
myth.
third world country, right? Because of war and famine and things like that, they would not be able to reproduce if that were the case. And so with working on that stress, it's sort of like that volume dial that I had mentioned earlier with anxiety. If our stress level is super high, then we need to figure out skills and tools in order to turn that down a bit. And that could be looking at our thought process when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy, using that coping card. Mindfulness is really helpful for stress because it allows us to just take a moment to just be present and almost like calm our thoughts and calm our bodies down. And then various self-care strategies. What are you doing for yourself daily, weekly? Are you exercising? All of those types of stress management techniques.
Great. Okay. And are there particular books or resources that you share or have people check out?
I know resolve.org.
Okay.
They are a good resource for infertility. But I don't have any books off the top of my head for clients. I have them for myself.
Okay.
But not clients.
Sure.
That is lacking though, because you can't, there's a lot out there for postpartum depression and anxiety right now, but not so much the experience of infertility.
So in terms of, how people find you, if they have a question, how do they get in touch with you? Or
Yes. Yeah. So my website is melissasauderlpc.com and Sauder is SAUDER.
Okay.
My phone number is 717-478-3332. And within my website, there is a contact form. So, if someone would like to reach out or had questions, that's how they can get in touch with me or call. Okay.
And obviously the entire world does not live in Pennsylvania and Lancaster County. So how do people find a Melissa Sauder in their area? How do they find a therapist?
Yes, good question.
What should they look for?
Yeah, so Postpartum Support International, they have a website that has a directory for women therapists that specialize in maternal mental health. So that's a really good avenue to try to find someone that specializes. And then also Psychology Today. I mean, they have a filter that can be adjusted for maternal mental health as well, or women's issues. And so it can be helpful for them to find someone who has that specific training.
Okay, great. And like I was saying, with 2020, the end of this year and into next year, are there major projects that you're working on or things you're rolling out? Or
Yeah, so Postpartum Support International, again, actually just they just started a new certification program, and it's the Perinatal Mental Health Certification Program. And so that will really distinguish therapists from whether they're just working with women's issues in general, or whether they are working with all things perinatal.
Okay.
And so that is something that I have all of the training for currently. I just have to sit for the exam. So I am looking to do that in the near future. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And I think that that's awesome for the maternal mental health field. And I do have some thoughts about starting some support groups. I think,
it's on air now.
I know. I told myself I would do that.
Time to put up or shut up. There you go.
So I'm thinking about doing a miscarriage, grief, and loss support group. Also infertility treatment support group, and then postpartum depression and anxiety support group. So I think that's a need, and a lot of my clients really look for that. So I'm starting to think about what that would look like.
Definitely. So glad that you're even considering that, because I always say the joke in counseling is like, somebody should start a group for that. Like there's never enough groups out there.
No, I know.
Man. Okay.
Yeah. And I found the 2 books that can I say that now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So there are 2 books that might be helpful. Taking Charge of Your Fertility is one of them. And then another one that I've had some women say have been helpful is Empty Womb, Aching Heart.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for digging those out.
Sure.
So, Melissa, thank you so much for taking time to be on and talk about this, and being willing to do a 3-part series with me. So I'm looking forward to the other 2 parts, but thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.
And there you have it, OTC listeners. Another episode done. 71 in the can. So again, thank you to Melissa for being willing to come on the show and chat with me. If you want to check her out or get connected to her, you can reach out to her through her website, melissasauderlpc.com. Sauder is Sauder. Again, another huge thank you and congratulations to the 5 winners of the Thursday is the New Friday book: Chris Stanton, Veronica March, Michael Neesmith, Martha Burke, and Patty Netto. Congrats again. Next episode will be episode 72. So the way this is going to go is we're going to have a couple more episodes to get us through 2021. I'm going to take a break during December to spend time with family. There's going to be a couple of best of episodes to kind of keep you all at bay until season 4 starts off in 2022. All right, take care.